The red planet Mars hung in space like a rusty ball against the black sky. Around it, 3 human ships moved slowly in a perfect line. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UE's horizon, watching the empty space ahead. His hands were sweating inside his gloves. Today was the day that would change everything for humanity. "Captain, we're getting a signal," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. Her voice was tight with excitement. "It's not from Earth." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. For 3 months, Earth had been receiving strange signals from deep space. Signals that clearly came from intelligent beings. The messages were mathematical at first, then simple pictures, then basic words in broken English. Someone out there was trying to talk to them. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The main display flickered to life. What Jake saw made him step backward. A face appeared on the screen, but it was not human. The being had blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water. 4 arms moved gracefully as it spoke. Its eyes were large and golden, and when it smiled, Jake could see too many teeth. "Greetings, primitive species of the 3rd planet," the alien said. Its voice was smooth and musical, but there was something cold in its tone. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective. We have been watching your clumsy attempts at space travel with great amusement." Jake stepped forward and straightened his uniform. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times, but his mouth still felt dry. "I am Captain Jake Morrison, representing Earth and all humanity. We welcome contact with your people." Kethvar made a sound that might have been laughter. "How charming. You speak as if you represent something significant. Tell me, little human, how long have your people been crawling between planets?" "We achieved faster-than-light travel 18 months ago," Jake replied, trying to keep the pride out of his voice. 18 months, Kethvar repeated, and this time he definitely laughed. "We have been traveling the stars for over 50,000 of your years. We have conquered death, built cities that float in space, and brought order to 1,000 worlds. And you have been playing with fire for 18 months. The alien's ship appeared on their sensors then. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of all 3 human vessels combined. Its hull was smooth and perfect, like a work of art. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. Your ships are quite amusing," Kethvar continued. "So crude, so simple, like toys built by children who have just learned to use tools. But we are not here to mock you, little humans. We are here to offer charity." Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. This was too important for his pride to get in the way. "What kind of charity?" "The Zephyrian Collective has always believed in helping lesser species," Kethvar said. "We have brought you gifts. Technology that your people might find useful, though I doubt you will understand much of it. Consider it our contribution to your eventual development." On the screen behind Kethvar, Jake could see other aliens moving. Around, they all had the same blue skin and multiple arms, but they wore different colored robes. Some stopped to look at the human ships and point, as if they were looking at animals in a zoo. "We appreciate any assistance," Jake said carefully, "but we would prefer to establish proper diplomatic relations. Perhaps we could arrange meetings between our governments." Kethvar waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "Governments? You flatter yourselves. Your entire species is barely more advanced than the creatures that crawl in our gardens. Diplomacy requires equals, and you are not our equals. You are, at best, an interesting curiosity." Jake felt his crew tense around him. Lieutenant Foster's hands were clenched into fists. Even Lieutenant Dan Walsh, usually the calmest person on the ship, was grinding his teeth. But Jake kept his voice level. "Nevertheless, we would welcome the chance to learn from your people and share what we know." "Share what you know?" Kethvar laughed again, longer this time. What could you possibly know that would interest us? You have barely left your own star system. You fight among yourselves over scraps of land and drops of oil. Your greatest achievement is learning to make fire burn in the vacuum of space. The ambassador gestured to someone off-screen. But we are not cruel. We will leave you some of our old technology. Broken things mostly. Obsolete equipment that we were going to dispose of anyway. Perhaps in a few thousand years, your descendants might figure out how to use some of it. Jake watched as dozens of objects began appearing on their sensors. They were being ejected from the alien ship toward the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Ship hulls, engine parts, computer systems. Weapons that looked melted and twisted. Even from a distance, Jake could see that most of it was damaged. There, Kethver said with satisfaction. Consider this our gift to your developing species. Study it well. Perhaps someday you will understand how truly generous we are being. Why? Are you doing this? Jake asked. What do you gain from helping us? Gain? Kethver tilted his head like a bird looking at a worm. We gain nothing. This is simply what civilized beings do for primitives. We have made similar donations to many species over the millennia. Most never amount to anything, but occasionally one will surprise us by actually learning something useful. The alien leaned forward, and his golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. Of course, some species become too ambitious. They try to challenge their betters. Those species learn very quickly that the galaxy has an established order, and that order does not change. The threat was clear, though delivered with a smile. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression neutral. We understand. Excellent, Kethver said. We will be watching your progress with great interest. Try not to disappoint. Used too badly. The communication ended abruptly. The alien ship began to move away, accelerating to speeds that made Jake's head spin. Within minutes, it was gone, leaving only empty space and the scattered debris in the asteroid belt. Lieutenant Foster broke the silence first. Captain, should we pursue them? With what? Jake replied bitterly. They could destroy all three of our ships without slowing down. He stared at the screen showing the floating wreckage. But they gave us something. Junk, said Lieutenant Walsh. Broken, useless junk. Maybe, Jake said slowly. Or maybe they just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 2 days later, Jake stood in the Oval Office in Washington, facing President Alan Carter and a room full of advisors. The meeting had been going on for 6 hours, and tempers were running high. It's an insult, said General Pete Harris, slamming his hand on the table. They treat us like animals and expect us to be grateful for their garbage. It's also an opportunity, said Dr. Helen Parker quietly. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. As head of the Terran Defense Initiative, she had been studying the alien signals longer than anyone. Their garbage is still technology. That's centuries ahead of anything we have. Assuming we can figure out how to use it, said Secretary of State Bill Murphy. For all we know, it's all completely broken. Then we fix it, Dr. Parker said simply. Or we learn from it. Or we use it as a starting point to build something better. President Carter had been quiet throughout most of the discussion. Now he leaned forward in his chair. Dr. Parker, what would you need? A secure facility, unlimited funding, and the best minds on the planet, she replied without hesitation. Give me 2 years, and I'll show you what humans can do with alien junk. The president was quiet for a long moment. Outside the windows, the sun was setting over Washington. Somewhere in space, alien beings were probably laughing at the primitive humans and their pathetic technology. General Harris, the president said finally, I want that debris collected and brought to Earth immediately. Dr. Parker, you have your facility and your funding. Build me something that will wipe the smiles off their blue faces." As the meeting broke up, Dr. Parker walked to the window and looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the Zephyrians were probably already forgetting about the insignificant little species on the third planet. They had no idea that they had just given humanity the tools to change the galaxy. "Forever. Thank you," she whispered to the stars, "for underestimating us." The underground facility in Colorado was buzzing with activity. Dr. Helen Parker walked through the main laboratory, watching teams of scientists and engineers work on pieces of alien technology. The place looked like a cross between a research lab and a junkyard. Broken alien machines covered every table, their strange shapes and glowing parts, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. 6 months had passed since the Zephyrians had dumped their gift in Earth's asteroid belt. The collection mission had taken 3 weeks, and the results were both exciting and frustrating. The humans had recovered over 200 pieces of alien technology, ranging from small devices the size of a smartphone to massive ship hull sections that required special transport. "Dr. Parker, you need to see this," called Sam Rodriguez from across the room. The young engineer was covered in grease and had a huge grin on his face. He was standing next to what looked like a twisted piece of metal that had been partially straightened out. Helen walked over to his workstation. Sam had been working on the same piece for 2 months, and she could see the progress he had made. What had once looked like a crumpled tin can now resemble some kind of engine component. "I figured out how it works," Sam said excitedly. "Look at this." He pointed to a series of crystal formations inside the device. "These aren't just decorations. They're actually part of the power system. The Zephyrians use these crystals to channel energy in ways we never thought possible." "Can we reproduce it?" Helen asked. "Not exactly," Sam admitted. "We don't have the same materials they use. These crystals are made from elements we've never seen before. But I think we can adapt the principle using Earth materials." Helen nodded and moved on to the next station. Dr. Lisa Chun was hunched over a computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She was the team's lead physicist, and her job was to understand how alien technology worked at the most basic level. "Any luck with the power systems?" Helen asked. Lisa looked up, her eyes red from staring at screens for too long. "It's incredible and frustrating at the same time," she said. "Their power sources are incredibly efficient, but they're also incredibly specific. Each device is designed to work with one particular type of energy source." "What do you mean?" "Watch this," Lisa said. She picked up a small alien device that looked like a glowing tube. "This is designed to work with something called a quantum cascade generator. It's incredibly powerful, but it only works with materials that cost more than our entire space program." Helen frowned. "So we can't use it?" "Not the way they intended," Lisa said with a smile. "But humans have always been good at making do with what we have. I've been working on a hybrid system that combines their principles with our fusion technology." She pulled up a diagram on her computer screen. "Look at this. If we take their energy channeling system and adapt it to work with our fusion reactors, we could create something that's both powerful and practical." Helen studied the diagram. Looked like a fusion reactor that had been designed by someone who had never seen a fusion reactor before. It was weird and complex, but somehow it made sense. "Have you tested it?" Helen asked. "Just computer simulations so far," Lisa replied, "but the numbers look good, really good." Helen walked to the next station, where Danny Wright was working on what looked like a pile of electronic components. Danny had been a video game programmer before the alien contact, but his experience with complex computer systems had made him invaluable to the project. "How are the computer systems coming along?" Helen asked. Danny looked up and shook his head in amazement. "These alien computers are incredible, but they're also incredibly stupid. What do you mean? They're faster and more powerful than anything we've ever built, Danny explained. But they're designed to do one thing and do it perfectly. They can't adapt or learn or handle unexpected situations. He pointed to a device that looked like a crystal brain. This thing can calculate the trajectory of 1,000,000 particles in real time, but it can't figure out what to do if one of those particles behaves differently than expected. And that's bad how? Helen asked. It's not bad. It's just different, Danny said. Human computers are slower and less powerful, but they're flexible. We design them to handle multiple tasks and adapt to new situations. That's because we've always had to make our technology work in different ways. Danny pulled up another screen showing lines of code. I've been working on a bridge system that lets human computers control alien hardware. It's like teaching a jazz musician to conduct a classical orchestra. The styles are different, but the end result could be amazing. Helen spent the rest of the day visiting different stations and talking to her team. The pattern was the same everywhere. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also incredibly specialized. Each piece was designed to work perfectly with other alien pieces, using materials and energy sources that humans didn't have access to. But her team was finding ways around every obstacle. They were adapting alien principles to human technology, creating hybrid systems that neither species had ever imagined. It was messy and inefficient and completely against everything the aliens probably believed about proper engineering. It was also working. That evening, Helen called a meeting with her senior staff. The conference room was small and cramped, but it was the only place in the facility where they could talk privately. I've been thinking about what we're doing here, Helen began, and I think we're approaching this wrong. Sam looked confused. What do you mean? We're making great progress. We are, Helen agreed, but we're trying to copy their technology instead of creating our own. We're thinking like them instead of thinking like humans. Lisa leaned forward. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop trying to make their technology work and start making our technology work better, Helen said. We take their principles and apply them to human engineering. We build something that's uniquely ours. Danny nodded slowly. You mean instead of trying to fix their broken ships, we build our own ship using what we've learned? Exactly, Helen said. We build something that no one has ever seen before. Something that combines the best of both approaches. That's going to be expensive, Sam warned, and risky. Everything worth doing is expensive and risky, Helen replied. But think about it. The Zephyrians have been building the same types of ships for thousands of years. They've perfected their technology, but they've also become predictable. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. What if we built something that combined their power systems with our adaptability, their materials, with our creativity, their precision with our flexibility? Helen began drawing on the board. The ship that emerged was unlike anything any of them had ever seen. It was part human, part alien, and part something entirely new. It would be a mongrel, Lisa said quietly. Yes, Helen agreed, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Over the next few weeks, the team threw themselves into the new project. They called it the UES Defiance, and it was unlike anything that had ever been built. The hull was made from salvaged Zephyrian metal, but it was reinforced with human composite materials. A power system combined alien energy crystals with human fusion reactors. The computer systems used alien processing power controlled by human software. Every component was a compromise, but somehow the compromises worked together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The ship was smaller than a typical Zephyrian vessel, but it was also more flexible. It was less powerful than alien technology, but it was also more adaptable. As construction progressed, Helen began receiving reports from around the world. The Zephyrians were expanding their influence, making contact with other species and offering them the same generous gifts they had given to humanity. Several civilizations had already become dependent on Zephyrian technology and were now essentially vassal states. The message was clear. The aliens didn't give away their old technology out of kindness. They did it to create dependence. Species that relied on Zephyrian technology eventually became servants of the Zephyrian collective. But Earth was different. Instead of becoming dependent, humanity was becoming stronger. The aliens had given them junk, but humans had turned that junk into opportunity. How long until the Defiance is ready for testing? Helen asked Sam during one of their weekly progress meetings. Another 6 months for basic systems, Sam replied. Maybe a year for full operational capability. We might not have a year, Helen said. Intelligence reports suggest the Zephyrians are planning to return. They want to check on our progress. Let them come, Danny said with a grin. I'd love to see their faces when they realize what we've built. Helen smiled, but she also felt a chill of worry. The Zephyrians had been spacefaring for 50,000 years. They had conquered entire star systems. What would they do when they discovered that their primitive pets had turned their garbage into something dangerous? She looked out the window at the Colorado mountains, where the first snow of winter was beginning to fall. Somewhere in space, alien beings were probably planning humanity's future without bothering to ask humans what they wanted. They were about to learn that humans had their own plans. The Defiance was almost ready, and with it, humanity would show the galaxy what could be accomplished when necessity met creativity. The used Defiance floated in space near the edge of Earth's solar system. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, looking out at the strange ship he now commanded. 2 years had passed since the Zephyrians had given humanity their gift, and the result was something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The ship was a patchwork of different technologies that somehow worked together. Human steel mixed with alien metal. Earth computers controlling alien power systems. It looked like it had been built in someone's garage, which wasn't far from the truth. But it flew, and that was what mattered. All systems are green, Captain, reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. She had been promoted from the Horizon and was now the Defiance's communications officer. We're ready for the first real test, Jake nodded. The ship had passed all its basic tests, but they had never pushed it to its limits. Today would be different. Today they would find out what their hybrid creation could really do. Captain, we're detecting a ship approaching from the outer system, called Lieutenant Dan Walsh from the sensor station. It's Zephyrian. Jake felt his stomach tighten. They had known this day would come. The aliens had said they would check on humanity's progress, and apparently they had decided it was time. Put it on screen, Jake ordered. The main display showed a sleek Zephyrian vessel approaching at high speed. It was smaller than the massive ship they had encountered 2 years ago, but it still dwarfed the Defiance. As it got closer, Jake could see the perfect curves of its hull and the strange lights that pulsed along its surface. They're hailing us, Amy reported. On screen, the familiar blue face of a Zephyrian appeared on the display. This one was younger than Ambassador Keffer, with fewer markings on his skin and brighter golden eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the same musical quality, but there was surprise in his tone. I am Commander Vextar of the patrol ship. Ethereal Wing, the alien said. I was not expecting to find humans operating a functional starship in this system. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the used Defiance, Jake replied. Welcome to our solar system, Commander. Vextar's 4 eyes studied the human ship on his own display. Jake could see confusion and distaste on the alien's face. That vessel appears to be constructed from scavenged materials. Surely you do not consider that mongrel construction to be a proper starship. It gets us from point A to point B, Jake said with a slight smile. Sometimes that's all you need. How primitive, Vexstar said with what sounded like amusement. I suppose we should be impressed that you managed to make any of our discarded technology functional. Though I must say, the result is quite ugly. Jake felt his crew tense around him, but he kept his voice calm. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, Commander. Would you be interested in seeing what our ugly ship can do? Vexstar laughed. The sound like wind chimes in a breeze. Are you challenging us to some sort of contest, Captain? How delightfully naive. Just a friendly competition, Jake replied. Ship to ship, to see how our different approaches compare. The Zephyrian commander thought for a moment, then nodded. Very well. It might be amusing to demonstrate the difference between proper technology and whatever you have cobbled together. What did you have in mind? Simple tests, Jake said. Speed, maneuverability, targeting accuracy. Nothing dangerous. Agreed, Vexstar said. Though I warn you, the outcome is quite predictable. The two ships moved to a clear area of space, away from any asteroids or debris. Jake could feel the excitement on his bridge as his crew prepared for the competition. This was what they had been working toward for 2 years. First test is straight line speed, Jake announced over the communication channel. From here to that asteroid cluster, about 50,000 kilometers. Acceptable, Vexstar replied. Shall we begin on your mark? 3, 2, 1, go. Both ships accelerated rapidly. The ethereal wing shot forward like an arrow, its perfect engines pushing it to incredible speeds. The Defiance followed, its hybrid power system roaring to life. The first few seconds, the Zephyrian ship pulled ahead easily. Its sleek design and advanced propulsion gave it a clear advantage. But as the race continued, something interesting happened. The Defiance began to gain ground. How are we keeping? Up? Jake asked his engineering officer. The alien power crystals are resonating with our fusion cores, Lieutenant Ben Parker replied. It's creating a feedback loop that's boosting our efficiency. By the time they reached the asteroid cluster, the ethereal wing was only a few ship lengths ahead. Vexstar's voice came over the communication system, and for the first time, he didn't sound amused. Your ship is faster than it appears, the commander admitted grudgingly. Thank you, Jake replied. Ready for the next test? The second test was maneuverability. Both ships had to navigate through a dense asteroid field, following a specific course marked by sensor beacons. This time, the results were different. The Zephyrian ship was precise and graceful, sliding through the obstacles with mathematical perfection. But it was also predictable, following optimal paths that any computer could calculate. The Defiance, on the other hand, moved like a living thing. When faced with a tight passage, it rolled and twisted in ways that the alien ship couldn't match. When blocked by a large asteroid, it used its thrusters to bounce off the rock's surface, gaining speed instead of losing it. Impossible, Vexstar muttered as the human ship completed the course several seconds ahead of his own. No ship should be able to maneuver like that. Human pilots, Jake explained, were used to making do with less than perfect conditions. The third test was targeting. Accuracy. Both ships fired at a series of small targets scattered throughout the asteroid field. This test revealed the biggest difference between the two technologies. The ethereal wing's weapons were incredibly powerful and precise. When they fired, the energy beams hit exactly where they were aimed. But the targeting system was rigid, designed to hit stationary or predictably moving objects. The Defiance's weapons were less powerful, but they were controlled by a targeting system that Danny Wright had designed based on video game principles. It could track multiple moving targets, predict irregular movement patterns, and adjust for unexpected changes in real time. When both ships finished firing, the results were close, but the Defiance had achieved better accuracy against the more difficult moving targets. Vextar was quiet for a long moment after the tests ended. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its condescending tone. "Your ship is not what I expected," he said slowly. "How did you achieve such performance with scavenged technology?" "We didn't try to copy your technology," Jake explained. "We adapted it to work with ours. We took the best of both approaches and created something new. Fascinating," Vextar said, "and highly irregular. The collective will be most interested in this development." Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding on both ships. 3 new contacts had appeared on the sensors, approaching fast from the direction of deep space. "Scarite warships," Vextar announced, his voice suddenly urgent. "This is most unfortunate timing." Jake had heard of the Scarites from intelligence reports. They were a militant species that had been raiding the outer territories of civilized space. Their ships were tough, and their crews were aggressive. "Can your ship handle 3 of them?" Jake asked. "Under normal circumstances, yes," Vextar replied. "But the Ethereal Wing is a patrol vessel, not a warship. Against 3 Scarite destroyers, the outcome would be uncertain." "Then we fight together," Jake said without hesitation. "You would assist us?" Vextar sounded surprised. "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Jake replied simply. The 3 Scarite ships were ugly, brutal-looking vessels that looked like they had been designed for ramming as much as shooting. They approached in a tight formation, their weapons all ready. "Charging. They're jamming our communications," Amy reported. "We can't call for help." "We don't need help," Jake said grimly. "We have each other." The battle began as the Scarite ships opened fire. Their weapons were crude but powerful, filling space with energy bolts and projectiles. The Ethereal Wing responded with precision. Strikes, its advanced weapon systems targeting the enemy ship's weak points, but the Scarites had numbers on their side. They spread out and began attacking from multiple angles, forcing the Zephyrian ship to divide its attention. Soon, the aliens were taking damage. That's when the Defiance showed what it could really do. Jake's ship moved like nothing the Scarites had ever encountered. It rolled and spun and twisted through space, using maneuvers that no conventional ship could perform. When the enemies tried to surround it, the Defiance would suddenly reverse direction or flip upside down, bringing its weapons to bear on unexpected targets. The human targeting system proved its worth as well. While the Scarites' own targeting computers struggled to track the wildly maneuvering human ship, the Defiance's weapons found their marks with devastating accuracy. "Impossible," one of the Scarite captains transmitted in broken galactic standard. "What kind of ship is this?" The answer came in the form of concentrated fire that knocked out his ship's main engines working together. The Ethereal Wing and the Defiance systematically disabled all 3 enemy vessels. The Zephyrian ship provided heavy firepower while the human vessel served as an unpredictable distraction that kept the enemies off balance. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Council was unlike any meeting in their 50,000-year history. Supreme Coordinator Yethmak sat at the center of the great chamber, his 4 arms moving restlessly as he listened to Commander Vextar's report. The other council members whispered among themselves, their golden eyes reflecting concern and disbelief. "You claim these humans have improved upon our technology?" asked Counselor Maxdai, her voice sharp with skepticism. "That is impossible. Our science has been perfected over millennia." "I know how it sounds," Vextar replied, standing in the center of the council chamber. "But I witnessed it myself. Their ship outmaneuvered mine in combat. Their targeting systems achieved better accuracy than our own. They have created something that should not exist." Supreme Coordinator Yethmak leaned forward in his crystalline throne. "You are saying that a species that has been spacefaring for less than 2 years has surpassed technology that took us 50,000 years to develop?" "Not surpassed," Vextar corrected carefully. But they have found ways to combine our technology with theirs that we never considered. The result is crude but effective. Primitive but dangerous. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some members called for immediate military action. Others demanded that Vextar be punished for incompetence. A few suggested that the entire report was false. Yethmak raised one of his hands, and silence fell immediately. What exactly are you recommending, Commander? The humans must be contained, Vextar said without hesitation. If word of their achievement spreads to other species, it could destabilize the entire galactic order. Dozens of worlds might begin questioning our authority. The Supreme Coordinator nodded slowly. The Zephyrian Collective controlled thousands of worlds through a combination of technological superiority and economic dependence. If other species learned that the primitive humans had turned Zephyrian castoffs into effective weapons, consequences could be catastrophic. Send Admiral Kexfer, Yethmak decided. He will take the Sovereign's will, can demonstrate to these humans what happens when inferior species become too ambitious. Meanwhile, on Earth, similar debates were raging in government buildings around the world. President Alan Carter sat in the Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and scientists. The mood was tense as they discussed Commander Vextar. Final transmission. He made it clear that the collective sees us as a threat now, said General Pete Harris. They're going to send a larger force to deal with us. We knew this might happen, Dr. Helen Parker said calmly. The question is, are we ready for it? Ready? General Harris laughed bitterly. We have one experimental ship against a galactic empire. How could we possibly be ready? We have more than one ship, Helen replied with a slight smile. The Defiance was just the prototype. She activated a holographic display in the center of the room. Images appeared showing construction bays hidden in asteroids throughout the solar system. In each bay, partially completed ships could be seen. We've been busy, Helen continued. Using the lessons learned from the Defiance, we've begun construction on a small fleet. Each ship incorporates improvements and innovations based on our experience. President Carter studied the images carefully. How many ships are we talking? About 5 will be completed within the next month, Helen replied. Each one is more advanced than the Defiance. We've solved most of the stability issues with the hybrid power systems, and we've improved the targeting computers based on combat. Data from the Scarite encounter. 5 ships against a galactic empire, General Harris repeated. The odds are still impossible. The odds were impossible when David fought Goliath too, said Ambassador Kate Sullivan, who had been quiet until now. But David won because he fought differently than everyone expected. Dr. Helen Parker nodded. That's exactly right. The Zephyrians have been the dominant power for so long that they've forgotten how to fight against equals. They're used to overwhelming inferior opponents with superior technology. But we're not inferior anymore, President Carter said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. No, Helen agreed. We're different. And different can be more dangerous than superior. 3 weeks later, the Sovereign's will arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. The massive dreadnought was 10 times the size of any human vessel, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Admiral Kexver stood on the bridge, confident that this show of force would end the human problem quickly and decisively. Transmit our demands to the human homeworld, he ordered his communications officer. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every human in the solar system would hear it. Admiral Kexver's image appeared on screens throughout Earth's space, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of absolute authority. People of Earth, he began, his voice carrying the weight of 50,000 years of galactic dominance. I am Admiral Kexver of the Zephyrian Collective. Your species has been found guilty of unauthorized technological development and potential threat to galactic stability. He paused, letting the words sink in. You will immediately surrender all vessels, constructed using collective technology. You will submit to collective oversight of your research programs. You will accept the status of a protected species under our guidance. You have 24 hours to comply. The transmission ended with a demonstration of the Sovereign's wills. Power. A massive energy beam lanced out from the dreadnought, striking a large asteroid and reducing it to glowing debris in seconds. The message was clear. Submit or be destroyed. On Earth, emergency meetings were called in every major capital. Some world leaders favored compliance, terrified by the overwhelming display of alien firepower. Others argued for resistance, inspired by humanity's recent achievements. The debate was settled when Captain Jake Morrison sent his own message from the bridge of the Defiance. Admiral Kexver, Jake said, his voice calm despite the circumstances. This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We decline your generous offer of protection. If you want our ships, you'll have to come and take them. The response from the Sovereign's will was immediate. Then you have chosen extinction. Admiral Kexver replied coldly. We will demonstrate why the collective has ruled the galaxy for 50 millennia. The battle began in the asteroid belt, among the very wreckage that the Zephyrians had given to humanity 2 years earlier. The human fleet consisted of 5 ships, the original Defiance, and 4 newer vessels named Resilience, Determination, Ingenuity, and Perseverance. Against them came the Sovereign's will, a weapon of such power that it had never been defeated in battle. Admiral Kexvor expected the fight to last minutes. The human ships were tiny compared to his dreadnought, and their weapons were clearly inferior. But as the battle unfolded, he began to understand why Commander Vextar had been so concerned. The human ships didn't fight like any vessels he had ever encountered. They moved in coordinated patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely planned. When he targeted one ship, the others would use the asteroids themselves as weapons, using gravity assists to hurl massive rocks at his vessel. Impossible, he muttered as the Defiance spiraled around a spinning asteroid, using the rock's rotation to accelerate to incredible speeds before launching itself at his ship's flank. The human weapons were weaker than his own, but they were being used with devastating creativity. Instead of trying to punch through his heavy armor, they targeted specific systems: sensor arrays, engine cooling vents, weapon mount joints. Each hit was small, but together they began to add up. Most frustrating of all was their unpredictability. Every time Admiral Kexver thought he understood their tactics, they would do something completely unexpected. The Resilience actually rammed one of his smaller escort ships, using its reinforced human-designed hull to crush the alien vessel's delicate weapon systems. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're taking damage to multiple systems. Their targeting is too precise. How is that possible? Kexver demanded. Our shields should stop anything they can throw at us. They're not trying to break through our shields, the officer explained. They're finding ways around them, and they're using our own technology against us. Admiral Kexver watched in growing alarm as the human ships continued their impossible dance of destruction. They fought like a pack of predators, each one covering the others while they struck at his ship's weak points. His powerful weapons couldn't hit targets that moved so unpredictably, and his shields were useless against attacks that came from unexpected angles. The decisive moment came when the Defiance, badly damaged but still fighting, managed to get close enough to the Sovereign's will to target its main weapon array. Captain Morrison's ship had lost half its hull plating and was trailing atmosphere, but its hybrid targeting system was still functional. Target acquired, reported Lieutenant Foster from her station, firing. The combined beam from all the human ships struck the dreadnought's primary weapon node at precisely the moment it was charging for another devastating blast. The feedback explosion tore through the Sovereign's will's main systems, leaving the massive ship crippled and drifting. Admiral Kexver stood on his damaged bridge, staring at the human ships that circled his vessel like victorious wolves. News of the Sovereign's will's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. On 1,000 worlds, species that had lived under Zephyrian rule for centuries heard the impossible story. The mighty collective, the power, that had ruled space for 50,000 years, had been beaten by a species that had barely learned to fly between stars. On the water world of Altair Prime, Ambassador Vel Shan of the Altarian Republic sat in her office, reading the intelligence reports with growing excitement. Her people had been under Zephyrian control for 800 years, forced to trade their rare crystals for outdated technology and empty promises of protection. Is this report confirmed? She asked her intelligence chief. 3 separate sources. He replied, the humans destroyed a collective dreadnought using ships built from salvage technology. Admiral Kexver himself has been taken prisoner. Velshan stood and walked to her window, looking out at the Zephyrian orbital station that controlled all traffic to and from her world. For the first time in her life, that station didn't seem so intimidating. Contact the human embassy on Earth, she ordered. Tell them the Altarian Republic wishes to discuss a trade agreement. Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. Species that had never dared to challenge the collective were suddenly asking questions about human technology. How had they done it? Could the same techniques work for other races? Most importantly, were the humans willing to share their knowledge? On Earth, President Alan Carter found himself dealing with a completely new kind of problem. Instead of worrying about alien invasion, he was now managing requests from alien governments who wanted to become allies. We're receiving 43 requests for diplomatic meetings, reported Ambassador Kate Sullivan during their morning briefing. And those are just the ones that came in overnight. What kind of requests? Carter asked. Trade agreements, technology, sharing military assistance, Kate replied. Half the galaxy wants to learn how we beat the Zephyrians. Dr. Helen Parker, now Director of Galactic Affairs, spread a star map across the conference table. We need to be careful about how we handle this. If we move too fast, we could destabilize entire sectors. What about the Zephyrians themselves? Asked General Pete Harris. Are they planning another attack? Our intelligence suggests they're having their own problems, Helen replied. Losing the Sovereign's will has caused major political upheaval in the collective. Some factions want to launch a full-scale war against us. Others are calling for negotiations. President Carter studied the map, seeing the location of human ships marked throughout the solar system. In the months since the battle, Earth's shipyards had been working around the clock. The small fleet that had defeated the dreadnought had grown to over 20 vessels, each one incorporating new improvements and innovations. What do you recommend? He asked. We form an alliance, Helen said simply. Not to conquer anyone, but to offer an alternative to Zephyrian rule. We share our technology with species that want independence, and we protect each other from those who would try to maintain the old order. 3 months later, the first meeting of what would become the Galactic Council of Free Worlds took place aboard humanity's newest ship, the Taz Liberation. The vessel was larger than the original Defiance, but maintained the same hybrid design. Philosophy. Its conference room was filled with representatives from dozens of species, all united by a common desire for freedom from collective rule. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood at the head of the table as ambassador. Kate Sullivan called the meeting to order. The diversity in the room was amazing. There were the blue-skinned Altarians with their water-adapted features, the rocky-skinned granite people from the asteroid mining colonies, the tall, thin ethereals who had evolved in low gravity. Even a few reformed Zephyrians who had abandoned their species' supremacist beliefs. Among them was Commander Vextar, the same Zephyrian officer who had first encountered the Defiance. He had been stripped of his rank by the Collective for his failure to contain the human threat, but Admiral Morrison had offered him a position in the new alliance. The former commander had become one of their most valuable intelligence sources, providing detailed information about collective military capabilities. "Friends," Ambassador Sullivan began, "we are here today because we all believe in the same principle, that no species has the right to rule over another simply because they have better weapons or older technology." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. These representatives came from worlds that had been dominated by the Collective for centuries. Some had been forced to provide raw materials at unfair prices. Others had been pressured to adopt Zephyrian culture and abandon their own traditions. All of them had been told they were too primitive to govern themselves. "The humans have shown us that advanced technology doesn't have to mean advanced wisdom," continued Sullivan. "They took discarded scraps and turned them into something that could challenge the galaxy's greatest power. But more importantly, they've offered to share that knowledge freely." Admiral Morrison stepped forward. "We're not here to replace the Collective's dominance with our own," he said. "We're here to prove that cooperation works better than conquest. Every species has something unique to contribute. Our strength comes from combining those differences, not erasing them." Dr. Helen Parker activated a holographic display showing the Alliance's first joint project. It was a space station, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of being built by one species, according to their traditions, it incorporated design elements from dozens of different cultures. Altarian water systems, human modular construction, Zephyrian power distribution, granite people mining technology. "This is the Freedom Station," Helen explained. "It will serve as a neutral meeting place for all free worlds, and as a research facility where we can work together to develop new technologies." The granite representative, a being who looked like a walking mountain, spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "How do we know the humans won't become like the Zephyrians? Power corrupts all species eventually." It was Vextar who answered, his golden eyes reflecting sadness and hope in equal measure. "Because I have seen how they fight," he said slowly. "The Collective conquers through overwhelming force. They make others dependent and then use that dependence to control them. The humans fight differently. They make others stronger." He gestured toward the holographic station. "Look at this design. A Zephyrian station would be built to demonstrate our superiority. This station is built to demonstrate cooperation. That is the difference." Over the following months, the Alliance grew rapidly. The Freedom Station became a symbol of the new galactic order, welcoming ships from any world that chose independence. Over subjugation. Trade flowed freely between member worlds, no longer controlled by collective regulations and tariffs. The Zephyrian response was predictable but ineffective. Supreme Coordinator Yethnak tried to organize military action against the rebellious worlds, but found that many collective members were reluctant to fight a war that could spread across the entire galaxy. Other Zephyrian factions began calling for reform, arguing that their species needed to adapt to the new reality rather than fight it. The breaking point came when the Collective's own homeworld experienced civil unrest. Younger Zephyrians, inspired by reports of the Alliance's success, began demanding democratic reforms and an end to their species' supremacist policies. The High Council found itself fighting rebellion at home, while trying to maintain order across their shrinking empire. 1 year after the battle that changed everything, Admiral Morrison stood in the observation deck of the Liberation, watching ships from 100 different worlds dock at Freedom Station. Each vessel was unique, reflecting its species' culture and technology. but all of them flew the same flag, a simple design showing multiple stars united in a constellation. "Hard to believe it all started with junk," said Dr. Helen Parker, joining him at the viewing port. "Best junk we ever received," Morrison replied with a smile. "Though I don't think the Zephyrians meant it as a gift." "They still don't understand what happened," Helen said. "They keep trying to figure out how we defeated their technology when what we actually defeated was their thinking." Through the transparent aluminum window, they could see the latest arrival at the station. It was a Zephyrian ship, but not a military vessel. This was a civilian transport carrying refugees from the collective's increasingly unstable territory. Many Zephyrians were choosing to join the Alliance rather than cling to their species' fading empire. "Do you think they'll ever learn?" Morrison asked. "Some will," Helen replied. "The smart ones are already learning. Vexstar is proof of that. The stubborn ones will keep fighting until they destroy themselves or change." A communication alert sounded, and Ambassador Sullivan's voice came over the intercom. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. The President wants to discuss the construction of 10 new heavy cruisers." Morrison and Helen exchanged glances. Even now, with the Alliance growing stronger every day, they couldn't afford to become complacent. There were still threats in the galaxy, species that preferred the old ways of conquest and domination.